social grants will end with an equal money system. Social grants has been around in various levels in various countries depending on their perceived wealth. Obviously, how that wealth is calculated is seldom considered, because most of the wealth of the first world countries is based on their strong exchange rate, where they can get the resources from the poor countries at a fraction of value, and therefore make themselves enrich themselves and give all kinds of services to their own citizens, while the rest of the world, due to the exchange rate problem, remains in poverty. This social grant system then obviously also take those that is kind of marginalized in the society and place them in a position where they have just enough, making it very difficult for them to actually break out of a cycle where they are purely existing and not really living. This is a point that will be investigated in a book that will be put together on what the social grant system currently is, how it's being funded, how does it affect various countries, why is it only effective in first world countries, and how it will end and why it will end on an equal money system. So Martijn will take point on this to give or to convene this, and if you want to participate in the discussion, it'll be on the Equal Money Forum, where you can contribute to the end of the social grant system. It's not a grant system at all. It was just a socialist system of control. It is in a form, a way of communism, because the being is protected socially, economically, at a minimum level. But certain admittances need to take place. In South Africa, it has caused major problems with people getting grants for children, so that would take the poor to have more children because they get more money. Really, a system that don't make sense. And although this is known, it's not changed, and this is allowed to become an absolute disaster. So participate at equalmoney.org.
With regards to social grants and why this, together with charities, is not actually a solution to people's problems with regards to money, is because, as Bernard highlights in his interview, social grants don't go to the core problem of the money problem within the world. What happens is that the social grants present a layer to people of a solution where people think they see that people are receiving money every month from the government in various forms. Social grants take on various forms, and people believe that this layer that is being presented to them by the government is a solution. And what happens is that we carry on with our lives, and as a society we look around us and we go, oh, look at all these unemployed people, and look at all these disabled people, and people with mental problems, and people who have been injured in some kind of war or in work, and they're not able to participate in society, in the economic system any longer. So, but it's okay, because I know that there is some form of a grant that is taking care of them. And what happens is that we tend to then put aside what is actually happening in the background for a social grant to even exist in the first place, and that the existence of a social grant, what consequence this has for the future generations within our society. So let's actually now go and look at what is happening behind the scenes and what are the outflows and consequences for the future generations, for us to simply allow the point and, sort of wipe the point to the side of, oh, it's okay, there are social grants. As Bernard mentions in his interview, for social grants to exist, your first world countries have access to resources within third world countries. They control those resources. They have major corporations and companies that are, and government institutions that are in place already, through the ages they have, gained monopoly and control of the resources within third world countries. And this has always been so since the early developmental stages of the capitalist system. And if you look at it, it is becoming more and more so, where first world countries will go in and they will gain control, specifically for the purpose of controlling money, gaining more money, and gaining control over the resources, which for the future generations will give first countries enough capital to remain first world countries. That is obviously how the game is played. That is the focal point. Nothing is ever done for people or for the world to get better. It is only about profit, it is only about greed, and it is about power. So in the background always exists this cycle, this continuous cycle of a battle between the first world countries that already exist, that want to uphold their power and their lifestyles for the elite, and they have to keep doing what they do to remain first world countries. And with that comes playing the game of obtaining rights to resources, mining rights, oil rights, all of those sort of strongholds to be able to continue being the power within the world. And the third world countries, they're just battling out of things like major poverty, absolute poverty, relative poverty. The third world countries are just getting out of the mindset of we are the poor people and we don't even comprehend what it means to be a second world country or a first world country. So what do we know? And the third world countries are considered to be developing countries. So they are in the process of accepting aid and support from first world countries who are already developed to be able to develop themselves. Now we are all aware of this. I'm pointing these things out to again refresh our memories of what world systems are actually running in the background behind the things that we take for granted. So this is the continuous cycles that you have going on between the major corporations that control the resources in the world and the smaller third world countries that are sort of the illusion is being created that everybody is being supported, all countries are being supported to become equal, but of course that is not what is actually happening. Because remember, if all countries, all leaders were actually and had made the decision to implement systems that would strengthen all countries to become equally supportive within themselves, we would have had such systems in the first place. And that is why we are suggesting an equal money system, because that is one global world system that from the point where the decision is made to implement such an equality-based world system, it stands by one principle: what is best for all, and principles will then be upheld from the beginning to work towards the one outcome, which is to make sure that everybody has a dignified life, and therefore the existing systems that are here, the infrastructure, the movement of goods and services, everything is already here, which means in an equal money system, nothing is going to be necessarily reinvented or broken down to have to be reinvented, because everything is already here. The infrastructure for an equality-based world system is already here. The services, the goods. And it'll just change from the principles that are underlying how we value life to a new value system. And through that, how we manage all the systems that are here will change to that of a point of absolute equality and making all resources available so that every human has a dignified life. So that's now an overview of what is currently going on in the background and the battle between the first world countries, what they really want, and what the illusion that is being created of the third world countries that are being advanced, but we're not actually advancing, because it's even like I studied in my psychology books on developmental studies, and there was a section where the developmental countries were saying, you know, it's all very fine to say we only have one choice, and that is to develop, to catch up with the first world countries, but what is development? Is it to become a first world country where people are obsessed with material things, and you have to fight this battle of becoming, you know, more dominant over resources, over other smaller developing countries again, and to make sure that your exchange rate then is more stable, so that you can then become this country of greed and where everything is focused on the movement of money. Some third world countries have been kicking against this, because they say that they don't consider that development. They don't, you know, for some countries, like for example in Africa, a lot of the focus has been on culture and religion, and therefore the reason why, you know, Africa in itself has remained for a very long time third world country is because the people themselves do not and did not want to participate in consumerism and everything that goes with becoming a first world country, because their focus was more on the quality of life, community, you know, sticking to the basics, working with nature, such things. And they are basically now, because everything is becoming so much about being able to buy your way into life, it is becoming exceedingly difficult for people to be able to live off the land. You know, the lands are drying up. There's overpopulation, which again does fall back on the responsibility of the people. You see, it is a vicious cycle that is happening here, but that has been the problem that has forced many undeveloped countries into having to develop, is because the resources are running out and they realize that they're going to have money to be able to buy basic goods. So there we have undeveloped countries having to become more developed and also realizing for themselves, gee, our resources are being taken up by first world countries because we've been kind of, you know, la-la land about it. And we're now going to either start showing an interest in attaining and controlling our own resources, or we are going to continually be the slaves that work for the first world countries and have our resources raped by the first world countries. So now, unfortunately, again, you look at what's happening in South Africa with, you've got your people who are now made the decision, let's just make everything again about greed and about money. So here you have an example of a developing country that is, the political leaders are not using the resources effectively as they said they would to support the people to become more effective and to get educated. Instead, the political powers have made it about greed and corruption so that the elite of South Africa can live the first world style lifestyles, while the millions of beings that are starving and being left in the illusion that some things are going to get better. Don't worry, God will take care of you. That illusion is being upheld, so that the elite can just continue doing what they're doing and become more like the first world elites. Have copious amounts of money, which, by the way, gets siphoned from taxpayers' money. And obviously from things like tenors and things that they've been given because of the positions that they're in. So getting back to the point of grant, so that you have running in the background all the time, everybody is aware of this. What I'm telling you now, you are not hearing for the first time and you're not becoming aware of it for the first time. You've just taken it for granted and seen it as harmless. But let's look at how the cycles prevail. So what happens is each country will then say, oh shame, okay, we have our unemployed people and we have our disabled people and war veterans and so on. Let's give them a grant. And as Bernard mentions, in the first world countries, these grants, again, create the illusion that the people, you have your super rich and you're rich, then you have your people living off grants, and that everything is fine, and that in the first world countries, everybody gets to have a fairly decent life. Whilst what is actually going on in the background as the function of the first world country I've just covered. Now, in the third world countries here in South Africa, for example, you have your people who earn a decent salary pay tax. So the tax money is then siphoned. Most of it goes towards corruption and greed. Parts of it goes towards what it's supposed to be used for. But again, not what was promised to the people, but just enough to make sure that the ANC gets voted for again in the next elections. But let's look here at what type of grants you get. You get your old age pension, which is 1,010 Rand. Disability grant, also 1,010. Remember, these are current numbers that I'm getting off a government website. And I do say that these numbers change according to the annual government budget. So then you get your war veteran grant of 1,030. Fascinating that the war veterans get more than your old age pensioners, or even people with disability grants. Fascinating. So you again go and participate in the fake idea of war, which is actually the elite fighting with each other for more money, and you get blown up in this war and you get more money than people who were cursed by the idea of a god with some disability. Then you have your grant in aid, and that basically that's 240 Rand. Your child support grant is 240. Care dependency grant, which means some institution has to take care of you, is 1,010. And foster care grant, 680. So, as Bernard mentioned in his interview, what is happening a lot in South Africa is that people are having now children to be able to receive the child support grant. What is happening is a lot of parents are having children, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 children, simply so that they themselves can get the grant money and use it for their own lifestyles. The children then get dumped on the streets, and you have all these homeless children and or end up in abusive situations because the parents didn't have the child in the first place for the reason of having a child. They had the child so they can get a grant. So within an equal money system, all these things that are based on dishonest practices, that are based on protecting what really goes on in the background as the money system, as protecting the elite, all of that's going to end. And it's also not about, an equal money system is not about charity. It's not about grants where you cover things, what's going on in the background, covering it up. What goes on in the background will be stopped. All greed-based businesses, developments, actual starting points will be stopped. And this is the whole point of an equal money system. It's not about us giving, a lot of people have this idea that we're just going to give money away to people. It's not about that. I suggest go and look at the research that we have done on the Equal Money website. Listen to these interviews that are entire series has been done and will be uploaded about the equal money system, about how an equal money system will affect all the current world systems as they are now, so that you can understand what we mean when we say an equal money system, that how it will affect everything that currently exists. We're not just taking money from those that work and throwing it at other people. That would again be charity and grants. We're talking about an entire changing of the value system of life, first of all, and valuing all life, and then using the currently using. I mean, this is not going to exist forever. It is an interim point to use the movement of money, meaning I have so much money from birth, and so that point is not abused. You have your money and you have a credit system so that you go and you get your food and you're able to pay for the things that you require for the month, and you and your family are taken care of. Resources will become available to people by right of birth. You will be given a place to live. You will have the basic life standards available to you, and from there we all participate within an equal labor system, where the labor system itself becomes about everybody participating in what needs to get done, and within that you will have people studying to become good at specific jobs like doctors and so forth, not because you are making a lot more money than the next person, which is currently why people study. I mean, you can say people do it because they care. Please, if the money wasn't there, 90% of people who are studying these long-term specialist jobs would not do what they're doing. It's become about money. Let's be honest about that. So if people now study to become specialists, they're doing so because they care about their fellow human. They know they are part of a society where it is about loving life, caring about life here and physical, making the living for each being the best that you can contribute. And you know that there's millions of other beings who themselves are studying because they honor life and they want to see everybody in a taken care of position, like what you are receiving. You want another to receive. And once that decision has been made, like when I looked at it for myself, and I made that decision that I want every single being to have a dignified life equally. There's no discrimination on skin color, age, culture, nothing. There's no information that can place one human above another, that can place one life form above another. That is absolute deception. And I mean, you cannot convince me that if you believe there is a creative force that created all things equally here in the physical, that creative force somehow went into an absolute state of delusion and created within itself the idea, oh, wait a minute, I want that little white dot on that planet to be superior to the black dot. Yes. And within that, the white dot with the little penis thing hanging from it must be superior to the little dot that doesn't have a penis thing. Yes. I think this is great. Please. That has been the deception of mankind that has developed since the beginning because of the desire for power. And the desire for power only exists within the human mind. So you cannot project what we have allowed thus far onto some creative force outside of you, up there invisible in the sky. You cannot blame it on Jesus, because Jesus, when he walked earth, most certainly did not speak about discrimination and separation. Absolutely not. What did he speak about that has been twisted and misrepresented through the time? He spoke about love thy neighbor, do for others as you want to do for yourself. He spoke about self and directing self within consideration of others and empowering yourself within, he showed things like healing and all of that stuff intended to empower the person. But because at that stage it was not understood by the human mind, it was misinterpreted, and those who understood what power already meant to them, the clergy and those already that were standing up in power, used that information to manipulate everybody to where we are now, where we have this delusional idea that some are different to others and there's a God in the sky who is going to sort everything out. You've read that in books, and therefore I suggest check your sources and get back to finding it within yourself to actually become a decent human being and look at the value systems that you've upheld thus far, because it's been comfortable. It's so comfortable for the elite, those of us who have food and a roof over our heads, to hold on to such value systems, of absolute deception. It is so easy. But you walk generation after generation of being the slave that works in a factory for a minimum wage for elitist families, and you see generation after generation what it is like to live in a little sweatshop in a little 2 meter by 2 meter box with 100 other sweaty, tired slaves, and you see generation after generation if you will still support the current world systems. What has to happen to a human being for them to say, I do not accept this world system the way it is, because I've been at the receiving end of the abuse so that all the other human beings on the planet can live comfortable lives. So let's start placing ourselves in the shoes of those who have been abused in the name of greed and capitalism and developing countries, and let's start getting real about what's going on this planet. Thank you very much.